There is a rail workers a British rail worker strike taking place in England at the moment. Understand, just for context, and this is from listener Harry. Most of the train drivers are represented by a different union, and they are not on strike. Okay, so don't be confused when people talk about how well some train workers are doing. And apparently, the press is really going to town on the British rail workers. Here is British Rail Workers General Secretary Mick Lynch outlining why they're striking.
Network Rail says the railway finances are already a mess. Do you not think that by taking strike action like this, you risk making them even worse?
Well, they're not a mess. So let's get this clear. The railway has been subsidised since time immemorial, at least since the First World War, and it probably always will be subsidised. What we're seeing now is a recovery in rail. Passenger numbers are up to 90% the week before last, and it's on course to go back to pre-COVID levels. But what we're seeing here is a smokescreen caused by COVID, and many employers are taking this opportunity. They're using what is a temporary phenomenon, COVID, and the temporary phenomenon of people being told not to go to work as a smokescreen to get rid of decent conditions, decent pay rates and decent agreements. Now, everybody wants our cities, towns and villages to recover. The way we do that, and one of the most important aspects of that, is by having a decent public transport system that can be relied on, is safe and accessible. Cutting staff, cutting services and cutting funding is the opposite to that, and nobody in our community should tolerate that from this government of billionaires who tell everyone else they've got to tighten their belts while they're raking it in.
There it is. Here is more of the press is really going after these folks. Here is Navarra Media's Ash Sarkar. She was on Good Morning Britain and pushing back in the same way there.
There'll be a lot of people waking up this morning who will be saying we have this horrific cost of living squeeze. Fuel costs have gone up dramatically. Even yesterday, they've gone up the most they have in 17 years. Energy prices are soaring. The last thing we need is the threat of rail action, which means on those 3 days when I have to go to work, I can't use my car because it's too expensive. I've got to go on the train, and now I can't do that either.
I'd actually flip it the other way around, all right? In a context where the cost of living crisis is being paid for by ordinary workers, the thing that you need are strong unions and the ability to collectively bargain for better pay and conditions. Now, why the RMT are striking, which is, I notice, not something people have talked about, is that workers who had been keeping the railways running during the pandemic are being threatened with job cuts and a pay freeze, which would mean that their pay isn't keeping up with inflation. And so that's why the union is doing their job and saying, we will use our strength, which is the fact that you can't run this without us, to protect and defend our workers' conditions. That is the job of a trade union. And if it's so important to keep the railway running, because I agree these workers are totally essential, then the bosses should be coming up with a reasonable package that the workers can accept. Every single person in this country has benefited from rights which have been secured by trade unions and the right to strike, including minimum wage, maternity pay, sick pay. These are all things which, before they were made law, were won by trade unions, and they benefited everybody. Because you're essentially selling a myth to the people of this country. You're saying, well, if you ask nicely, if you play nicely, if you're a good little boy or girl, maybe the bosses will take pity on you. That's not how it works. Workers have one form of power, and that is collective bargaining. And every right we have as workers in this country has been secured by playing hardball.
What's interesting, too, about the way that unions are talked about, and obviously the density of unionization in England is far higher than here, far higher. But and maybe there was a time in this country where people talked about unions in this way. I don't recall it. But I've seen some other clips of Lynch Mick Lynch, basically saying like, well, this is the job of the union. Like everybody has their job, and the union's job is to make sure that they have the ability to empower workers to get what they deserve in the context of providing this service and doing this business. I mean, it is a very straightforward dynamic, right? I mean, and like you never hear, like when we talk about Starbucks, we talk about Amazon or this and that, we never hear it's like, well, the union's just doing their job. The same way everybody else is doing their job, they're doing their job. Like there is a sense in this country that unions are these alien entities that don't belong and are trying to, inject themselves into an arena where they don't belong. But this is what unions do. Unions are not these foreign entities. Like, where'd these things come from? These are natural players in our society. You don't hear people saying like, what are these EMTs doing here? This is their job. This is what unions do. And like in this country, we haven't quite gotten there. It's very strange.
No.
Where it's just like we have to justify the existence of unions, never mind their actions.
And it's wild, this line that they try to take where it's like, yeah, we're all suffering. It's like, I have not seen rich people suffer. I've not seen any sign that like
show me where you're suffering.
Super wealthy, like Boris Johnson, he talks about paid discipline. I'm like, tell your friends, man.
That's the funny thing. You don't even see anybody attempt to get away with the shared sacrifice line. There's no shared sacrifice in this situation.
There is a very localized sacrifice and localized comfort.
I'm curious what you guys think, and as I was thinking about this a little bit with Mick Lynch and Christian Smalls, as much as I obviously know it's hard to like, I want to temper my like excitement that there is seemingly some more of like a actual attention to labor organizing and like actual like, I don't think it's necessarily like celebritizing them, but I almost think it is good that there are public, really like kind of engaging figures like Smalls and Mick Lynch that are getting some sort of traction in the press like this.
Without a doubt. I mean, that's what it takes to get that type of attention. I mean, it would be better if we didn't have, we weren't so oriented towards celebrity or individuals. But,
right.
This
like
is
one person. Yeah.
Yeah. This is.
And I mean, the good thing about it is, we have a sort of like worker, not directed or led, but it's sort of like pro-worker, but it's not really led by workers, right? It's often led by, PMC, not that they can't do really good things, but like when you have people like Smalls and Mick out there that are they're just workers and they're speaking for workers, it allows a more direct form of communication, I think.